A betrothal is meant to be a promise, but for Lady Seraphina Davenport, it was a death sentence. At dawn, her father sold her to the cruelest man in London, Lord Alistair Vane, to settle a ruinous debt. She had resigned herself to a life of misery, her fate sealed by the morning light. But the ink on the contract was not yet dry. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in blood red, the doors to her prison blew open. A man colder than winter and more powerful than the crown stood in the doorway. He was the Duke of Hawthorne, and he had come to claim her. The weak grey light of dawn did not flatter Bellwood Manor. It exposed the water stains on the silk wallpaper and the worn threads in the Aubusson carpet. It illuminated the desperation in Lord Julian Davenport's eyes. Seraphina Davenport stood beside him, her spine rigid, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. She stared at a crack in the marble fireplace, focusing on it as if it were a lifeline. She could not look at the man standing opposite them, his portly figure encased in expensive, restrictive tailoring. Lord Alistair Vane smiled, a wet, unpleasant expression. "Well, Davenport," he said, his voice a low rumble. "The sun is up. The deadline has passed." "Indeed, Lord Vane, indeed." Lord Davenport, a man who once commanded audiences with his booming voice, sounded like a deflated bladder. He cleared his throat, took his daughter's ice-cold hand and pulled her forward. "My dear," he said, avoiding her eyes, "you know the constraints upon this family. You know the duty you must perform." Seraphina said nothing. She had known this was coming. For weeks, Lord Vane had been a permanent fixture in their home, his presence coating everything like a layer of grime. He was a man who had built a shipping empire on dubious contracts, and, it was whispered, lost crews. He was twice her father's age and half his height, with eyes that assessed everyone as a commodity. And for the past month, he had been assessing Seraphina. Her father had gambled away the last of the Davenport fortune, borrowing heavily from Vane until the debt was a mountain they could never climb. Vane didn't want the crumbling Bellwood Manor. He wanted the Davenport name. He wanted Seraphina. "It is with great, profound joy," Lord Davenport choked out the words, "that I announce the formal betrothal of my daughter, Lady Seraphina Davenport, to Lord Alistair Vane." The words hung in the empty ballroom. There was no applause. The only witnesses to this joyous occasion were Vane's two glowering men-at-arms and Seraphina's frail mother, Lady Eleanor, who was weeping silently into a handkerchief by the window. Vane stepped forward and took Seraphina's hand. His skin was damp. He raised her hand to his lips, his eyes never leaving hers, glittering with a sense of triumph and possession. "My dear Lady Seraphina, you have made me the happiest of men." Seraphina felt a wave of nausea, so profound she swayed on her feet. This was not a betrothal. It was a purchase. She was the price for her father's failures. "We will have the engagement dinner tonight," Vane declared, not asked. He stroked her hand with his thumb. "A quick affair. I see no reason to delay the wedding. Shall we say the end of the week?" "So soon?" Seraphina finally spoke. Her voice was a dry croak. "Why wait, my pet?" Vane smiled. "Unless, of course, your father wishes to settle his accounts in cash, in full, by sunset." Lord Davenport flinched. The amount was staggering, enough to buy half of Mayfair. No, he said quickly. "Tonight will be splendid. The end of the week is perfect." Vane released her hand, leaving a cold, clammy feeling behind. "Excellent. I will return at 6. Do try to look a little more cheerful, my dear. A bride should glow." He turned and strode from the room, his men falling in behind him. The heavy oak doors boomed shut, sealing Seraphina's fate. The moment he was gone, Lord Davenport collapsed into a chair, burying his face in his hands. "It is done. We are saved. We are saved." Seraphina's voice, quiet moments before, now cracked like a whip. "You are saved. I am sold. Seraphina, you don't understand the pressure." "I understand," she said, her voice dropping to a cold, level tone that frightened him more than her shouting would have. "I understand that you are a coward. You have condemned me to a life with that creature. He is a wealthy man. He will provide for you. He will own me." She turned from her father and walked towards her mother. Lady Eleanor reached out a trembling hand. "My darling, perhaps he is not so." "Do not," Seraphina whispered, pulling her hand away. "Do not lie to me. Not today." She walked out of the ballroom, her back straight, each step an agony of controlled rage. The sun was now fully in the sky, streaming through the windows. But Seraphina felt nothing but a profound, encroaching darkness. The day stretched before her, a suffocating 12-hour prison. She had until sunset, when she would have to smile and accept the congratulations of a society that would whisper about her misfortune behind their fans. Her forced betrothal was announced at dawn. Her life, as she knew it, was over. Seraphina spent the day in her chambers, a mausoleum of her girlhood. She packed away her books of poetry and her drawings. It felt like burying friends. Her maid, Bessie, moved about the room, her eyes red from crying. "My lady, you mustn't," Bessie pleaded, touching a small watercolor of the coastline. "You can't marry him. Everyone knows what he is." "And what am I?" Seraphina asked, her voice hollow. "I am a bargaining chip. I am the last asset in the Davenport portfolio. My father has cashed me in." "But there must be another way." "There is not." Seraphina sat on the window seat, looking out over the overgrown gardens of Bellwood. In the far distance, across the rolling hills and a dark stretch of forest, lay the lands of Shadowfen. Shadowfen. The name was a dark whisper in the county. It was the vast, sprawling estate of the Duke of Hawthorne. While Bellwood crumbled, Shadowfen rose like a fortress of black stone, impeccably maintained, but utterly forbidding. Its master was a man no one ever saw. The old duke had died years ago, leaving the title and immense fortune to a distant, unknown cousin. This new duke, Maximilian, had arrived from parts unknown, dismissed the entire staff, and lived in total seclusion. Some said he was disfigured, a monster hiding from the world. Others said he was mad, scarred by some terrible tragedy. He was the local bogeyman, a convenient terror to frighten children and gossip about at teas. Seraphina stared at the dark woods that separated her from his lands. "At least the Duke of Hawthorne has the decency to hide his monstrosity," she murmured. "Lord Vane parades his for all the world to see." A soft knock came at the door. It was her mother, Lady Eleanor, holding a small, velvet-covered box. "Seraphina," she said, her voice frail, "these were your grandmother's, the Davenport pearls. You should wear them tonight." Seraphina looked at the creamy, lustrous pearls. They represented everything she was supposed to be, pure, beautiful, and valuable. She felt a surge of bitterness. "So I can look the part of the prized sow being sold at market?" "Seraphina, please." Lady Eleanor sank onto the settee, her breathing shallow. "Your father did what he had to. This Vane had us cornered. He owned all our debts. He called them all in at once. It was either this or debtor's prison for your father. For all of us." "Prison," Seraphina mused. "Sounds remarkably peaceful." "Don't say that." Her mother's panic was real. "You don't know what you're saying. You are strong. You will handle this. You will find a way to manage him." "Manage him?" Seraphina laughed, a short, harsh sound. He does not want a wife to manage. He wants a decoration to prove he is powerful enough to buy a Davenport. She took the pearls from the box. They were cool and heavy in her hand. Very well. I will wear them. I will wear the dress. I will play the part. But know this, Mother. The woman my father is forcing into that ballroom tonight is not his daughter. She is a ghost. The hours ticked by with agonizing slowness. 1 o'clock. 3 o'clock. The sun began its slow, merciless descent, pulling her future along with it. At 5, Bessie came to help her dress. She chose the darkest blue velvet in her wardrobe, a dress that spoke more of mourning than celebration. Bessie laced the corset tighter than usual, and Seraphina welcomed the pain. It was a physical anchor in the storm of her emotional detachment. She fastened the Davenport pearls around her neck. They felt like a collar. She stood before the mirror. A pale woman with haunted eyes stared back. Her dark hair was coiled perfectly, her posture immaculate. She was the perfect image of aristocratic sacrifice. "My lady," Bessie whispered. "It's nearly 6. Seraphina nodded. She heard the crunch of carriage wheels on the gravel drive below. Lord Vane arriving to claim his prize. She took one last look at the woman in the mirror. "Let us go down," she said, her voice devoid of all emotion. "It would be rude to keep my owner waiting." She walked out of her room, not toward a celebration, but toward an execution. The sun was just beginning to touch the horizon, casting long, menacing shadows across the hall. One of those shadows seemed to stretch all the way from the neighboring estate, from the dark, unseen heart of Shadowfen. The grand hall of Bellwood Manor was filled with attention so thick it was almost visible. A few local families, those who owed Lord Davenport favours or were too afraid of Lord Vane to refuse, had gathered. They milled about awkwardly, sipping weak punch and avoiding Seraphina's gaze. Lord Davenport was already flushed with wine, his laughter too loud, too forced. Lord Vane stood by the fireplace, preening. He had changed into a waistcoat of garish gold brocade, a massive ruby gleaming on his cravat. He was surveying the room as if he had already purchased it, along with its occupants. He spotted Seraphina on the staircase, and his smile widened. "Ah, my bride," he boomed, silencing the low chatter. Seraphina descended the stairs, her hand grazing the banister. Each step felt like walking through wet cement. She could feel Vane's eyes on her, a physical, repulsive weight. He met her at the bottom step, seizing her hand and tucking it into the crook of his arm. "Exquisite, my dear. The pearls are a nice touch. A symbol of your purity, eh?" He laughed, a phlegmy sound. "Lord Vane," she said, inclining her head, her voice a perfect cold monotone. "You will call me Alistair, my pet. We are to be family, after all." He patted her hand, and she fought the urge to wipe her skin on her dress. The clock on the mantelpiece began to chime. 6 o'clock. The sun, a fiery red orb, was now perfectly balanced on the edge of the distant hills. Its crimson light flooded the room, bathing everyone in a bloody glow. "It is time," Vane announced, raising his glass. "My friends, today I—" Boom! 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 The sound was not a knock. It was a physical assault on the front doors, a heavy, rhythmic pounding that rattled the portraits on the walls. Lord Davenport started, spilling his wine. "Good God, who—" The doors flew open with such force that they slammed against the interior walls. The chatter died instantly. Silhouetted against the dying, blood-red sun stood a man. He was not a guest. He was an apparition. He was tall, impossibly so, and broad-shouldered, draped in a black, perfectly tailored coat that seemed to drink the light from the room. He didn't move. He simply stood in the doorway, a figure of absolute authority. "What is the meaning of this?" Lord Vane sputtered, stepping forward. "This is a private—" The man took one step into the room, and the light finally caught his features. It was not the monster of rumour. There were no disfigurements. This was the Duke of Hawthorne, and he was, in a word, magnificent. He had a face of harsh, classical beauty, a strong jaw, a straight nose, and eyes so dark they seemed to be holes in the world. But it was a beauty devoid of all warmth. He looked at the assembled guests with a cold, profound disdain. "Maximilian," Lord Davenport whispered, his face draining of all colour. He looked as if he'd seen a ghost. The Duke's gaze swept the room, bypassing Vane entirely, skipping over Davenport and landing, with shocking intensity, on Seraphina. He looked at her for a long, silent moment. She felt not like a woman being appraised, but like a chess piece being identified. "Hawthorne," Vane snarled, recovering his bluster. "Your Grace, you are not on the guest list. This is an engagement celebration." "I am aware." The Duke's voice was a deep, smooth baritone that resonated in the hall. "I am not here to celebrate, Vane. I am here to correct a clerical error." He advanced into the room, his boot heels clicking on the marble. He held a sheaf of papers in one gloved hand. He stopped not in front of Vane, but in front of Lord Davenport. "Lord Davenport," the Duke said, his voice quiet but carrying to every corner. "You have a short memory." "I don't know what you mean, Your Grace," Davenport stammered, backing away. 10 years ago," the Duke said, "you were on the brink of ruin. A scandal involving your investments threatened to send you to Newgate. You came to my predecessor." Davenport was now ghost-white. "It was a loan, a simple loan." "It was not," the Duke corrected. He held up the papers. "It was a contract, a specific one. My cousin, the former Duke, was a particular man. He lent you the fortune required to save your name, but he demanded collateral, not Bellwood, not your lands." His dark eyes flicked to Seraphina. "He demanded your most valuable, and at the time, only, asset." Seraphina's blood ran cold. The Duke continued. "He funded your entire life for a decade, Julian. The contract stipulated that the debt was nullified upon his death, unless one specific clause was triggered, and you, in your infinite wisdom, triggered it this morning." He unrolled the top document. "This is a marriage contract, signed by you, Lord Davenport, 10 years ago. It promises the hand of your daughter, Lady Seraphina, to the holder of this document, the Duke of Hawthorne. It states clearly that should she be betrothed to any other man, the holder has until sunset on the day of the announcement to invoke his prior claim." A collective gasp filled the room. Lord Vane's face turned a shade of puce. "This is preposterous. It's archaic. It's invalid." "It is ironclad," the Duke said, his voice slicing through Vane's protests. "It was witnessed by 3 magistrates and sealed by the Crown. You, Vane, have a bill of sale for a bankrupt estate. I," he tapped the document, "have a prior lien on the only thing of value left." He turned his full, terrifying attention to Seraphina. He was close enough now that she could see the cold fire in his eyes. He held out his gloved hand. "Lord Vane's announcement at dawn was an interesting gesture," Maximilian said, "but the sun has now set, and the debt is due. Lady Seraphina, you will come with me." It was not a request. It was a command. Vane lunged forward. "You will not! She is my fiancée." The Duke didn't even look at him. He moved with a speed that was startling. He caught Vane's wrist, and with a simple, brutal twist, forced the larger man to his knees with a cry of pain. "She," the Duke said, looming over the whimpering Vane, "is my collateral." He released Vane, who scrambled back, clutching his arm. The Duke turned back to Seraphina. He did not smile. He did not offer comfort. He simply waited. Her father was weeping. Her mother had fainted. Lord Vane was humiliated and breathing threats. Seraphina looked at the hand of the cold, ruthless Duke. Then she looked at the sputtering, repulsive Lord Vane. One was a prison she knew. The other was a terrifying, unknown darkness. She chose the darkness, ignoring her father's desperate cry of, "Seraphina, no!" She placed her trembling hand into the Duke's gloved one. His grip was like steel. "A wise choice," he murmured. Without another word, he turned and pulled her with him, out of the stunned ballroom, out of Bellwood Manor, and into the blackness of the waiting night. The Duke's carriage was as black and imposing as its master. The interior was lined with dark leather, smelling faintly of sandalwood and old books. It was a stark, masculine space, devoid of any comfort. Seraphina sat opposite him, her hands clasped in her lap, the pearls feeling impossibly heavy around her neck. The Duke had not spoken a word since he'd pulled her into the carriage. He simply sat and watched her, his expression unreadable in the flickering lamplight from the carriage exterior. The silence stretched, thick and oppressive. Seraphina, trapped between shock and a strange, cold relief, finally broke it. "Why?" she asked, her voice steady. "Why have you done this?" The Duke of Hawthorne continued to watch her, as if she were a puzzle he was disassembling. "Lord Davenport owed a debt. I collected it. I am not a piece of furniture, Your Grace. I am a woman." "To your father," he replied, his voice chillingly level. "You were a line item on a ledger, a debt to be paid to Lord Vane, or a debt to be paid to me. The only difference is the name of the creditor." "And you?" she challenged, finding a spark of her earlier fire. "What am I to you? A prize you stole from a rival?" A flicker of something, anger, amusement, passed through his dark eyes. "You credit yourself with too much importance, Lady Seraphina, and you credit Lord Vane with the status of rival. He is an insect. You are merely the consequence of his actions." "A consequence? You are a contingency, a tool. My business was not with you, but with Vane and your father. You were the most efficient way to conclude it." His words were brutal, stripping away any romantic notion she might have conjured. This was not a rescue. She had not been saved. She had been transferred. "So what happens now?" she asked. "You have your collateral. Am I to be locked in your fortress? Are we to be married?" The word tasted like ash. "Marriage," the Duke said, looking out the window as the carriage passed through massive, wrought-iron gates, "is a legal arrangement. This contract is binding. But you need not fear any traditional requirements of such an arrangement. I have no interest in you as a wife." Seraphina wasn't sure if she was relieved or insulted. "Then what do you want?" The carriage pulled to a stop before the largest house she had ever seen. Shadowfen was not a manor. It was a Gothic citadel. Turrets of black stone pierced the night sky, and light glowed from only a few narrow windows. It looked like a place where fairy tales went to die. The carriage door was opened by a stern-looking footman. The Duke alighted, and, as an afterthought, turned to offer her his hand. She ignored it and stepped down herself. The air was cold, carrying the scent of pine and the distant sea. "What I want, Lady Seraphina," the Duke said, as he led her up the massive stone steps, "is to be left alone. You will have your own wing. You will be provided for. You will want for nothing, except your freedom. In return, you will not leave these grounds. You will not contact your family. You will not, under any circumstances, interfere with my affairs. You are, for all intents and purposes, my prisoner. The grand doors of Shadowfen opened, revealing a cavernous, dark hall. A formidable woman in a severe black dress, her grey hair pulled into a tight bun, stood waiting. "Mrs. Pike," the Duke addressed her. "This is Lady Seraphina Davenport. She is to be given the East Wing. See that she is comfortable, but ensure she understands the rules of my house." "Yes, Your Grace." The housekeeper's voice was as starched as her apron. The Duke turned to Seraphina. His face, in the dim light of the entryway, was a mask of cold indifference. "Welcome to Shadowfen, my lady. I trust you will find it secure." He turned on his heel and disappeared down a dark corridor, his footsteps echoing on the stone, leaving her alone with Mrs. Pike. "This way, my lady," the housekeeper said, her tone implying that lady was a title of courtesy, not respect. Seraphina was led up a winding staircase, through silent, echoing halls draped in shadows. The East Wing was, as promised, luxurious. A large sitting room, a bedroom, and a dressing room, all furnished with heavy, exquisite furniture. A fire crackled in the hearth, but it offered no warmth. Bessie, her maid, was not there. She was utterly alone. "Meals will be brought to you," Mrs. Pike stated from the doorway. "His Grace dines alone." "For how long?" Seraphina asked, walking to the window. It was barred, not with iron, but with thick, decorative stonework that served the same purpose. "For how long? What, my lady? For how long am I to be kept here? A week? A year? A lifetime?" Mrs. Pike's expression did not soften. "You are here as long as the Duke wills it. That is all you need to know." The housekeeper curtsied stiffly and left, the sound of the key turning in the lock a definitive metallic click. Seraphina leaned her forehead against the cold glass. She had escaped Lord Vane. She had run from the fire, only to find herself trapped in the Arctic ice of the Duke's mysterious plans. He called her a tool, a contingency. She looked out at the dark, unfamiliar grounds of Shadowfen. She was no longer Lady Seraphina Davenport, the bartered-away bride. She was a captive, and the name of her jailer was Maximilian, Duke of Hawthorne. The first week at Shadowfen passed in a silent, gilded monotony. Seraphina saw no one but Mrs. Pike and a young, terrified-looking maid named Rose, who brought her meals and refused to make eye contact. The Duke was a ghost. She heard no sound from his wing, saw no sign of his presence, save for the oppressive, orderly silence of the house. She was a prisoner, but a well-appointed one. The library in her wing was extensive. She read, she walked the perimeter of her sitting room, and she stared out the window at the forbidding, beautiful grounds. But Seraphina was not her father's daughter. She was not a coward. She was not passive. On the 8th day, she refused to be a ghost in his house any longer. When Rose brought her breakfast, Seraphina walked straight past her, out the unlocked door. Mrs. Pike, who was clearly meant to be a dragon, had not anticipated a frontal assault at 8 a.m. Seraphina was halfway down the main staircase before the housekeeper caught up. "My lady, you are not permitted." "I am going to the library," Seraphina said, not stopping. "The main library. The one I can smell from my hall. The one with the books that haven't been gathering dust for a decade. His Grace forbids it. He is working. Then he can forbid me himself." She pushed open the massive oak doors to the main library and stopped dead. The room was vast, 2 stories high, with rolling ladders and tens of thousands of books. But the room was not empty. The Duke of Hawthorne was there, standing before a massive table covered in maps, ledgers, and shipping timetables. He was not in his formal black coat, but in his shirt sleeves, his cravat loosened. He looked less like a duke and more like a general planning a war. He looked up as she entered, his dark eyes narrowing. He did not look surprised. He looked annoyed. "I gave specific instructions, Mrs. Pike," he said, his voice dangerously soft. "She would not be stopped, Your Grace," the housekeeper stammered. "Leave us," he commanded. Mrs. Pike fled, closing the doors behind her. Serafina and the Duke were alone. "You are testing my patience, Lady Serafina," he said, turning back to his maps. "You are testing my sanity, Your Grace," she retorted, advancing into the room. "You cannot just acquire a person and store them on a shelf like one of your dusty books. I demand to know why I am here, the truth, not your cryptic nonsense about collateral." He slowly, deliberately, picked up a pen and made a notation on a ledger. "I told you, you are here to conclude a business arrangement." "What business? What is all this?" She waved her hand at the table. "This is not the work of a reclusive duke. This is the work of an obsessive. Who are you fighting?" He finally looked up, and the cold indifference was gone. In its place was a burning, white-hot rage that stunned her into silence. "You," he said, his voice a low, lethal vibration, "are a Davenport. You ask me what this is? This is your legacy." He picked up a ledger and threw it onto the table in front of her. "Look at it." She hesitated, then opened the book. It was a list of names, beside them, dates, and beside them, the word deceased. There were dozens of names. "I don't understand," she whispered. "No," he sneered. "Of course you don't. You, in your fine dresses and your pearl collars. You just benefited from the money. You never asked where it came from." He jabbed a finger at the top of the page. "The Sea's Jewel, a shipping vessel, owned by a consortium. That consortium included two primary partners, Lord Alistair Vane and your father, Lord Julian Davenport." Serafina's blood turned to ice. "My father was in business with Vane?" "Business," the Duke scoffed. "They were partners in crime. 10 years ago, the Sea's Jewel was a packet ship. Old, rotted, unsafe. Vane and your father bought it for pennies, insured it for a fortune, and filled it with passengers they knew would never reach their destination. They skimped on repairs, hired a skeleton crew, and sent it into a winter storm. "No," she whispered, her hands shaking. "My father wouldn't." "He did," Maximilian roared, slamming his fist on the table. "The ship went down in the Irish Sea. 84 souls. Men, women, children. All so Vane and your father could collect the insurance money and blame a dead captain." He stalked to the window, his back to her, his shoulders rigid. 84 souls, he repeated, his voice thick with a pain that was terrifying in its depth. "And one of them was my sister." Serafina sank into a nearby chair, her legs giving way. "My younger sister, Clara," he said, his voice hollow. "She was 17. She was returning from school in Ireland. I was supposed to meet her in Bristol, but she never arrived." He turned back, his face a mask of grief and fury. "Your father and Vane covered it up. They used their influence to have the inquiry closed. They paid off the right people. They ruined my family name, accusing us of incompetence, as we held a minor stake in the shipping line they bankrupted. They walked away wealthy. Vane built his empire on that blood money. Your father squandered his, gambling it away, paying for your dresses and your debut. And you," Serafina breathed, finally understanding, "you inherited the title and the wealth." "And the truth," he said. "It took me years of digging, finding old crew lists, tracking down families. I found the first mate, living in poverty in Boston. He told me everything. He had the original, falsified repair logs. signed by Vane, witnessed by your father. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. You knew Vane was forcing my father. You knew he wanted to marry me. Vane's greed is predictable. After he ruined your father a second time, this time on purpose, with his predatory loans, he wanted the ultimate prize. He wanted the Davenport name. He wanted you. So you took me, she said. You didn't save me. You stole me. He took my sister's life, the Duke whispered, his voice shaking with a decade of suppressed rage. His actions, and your father's, left her at the bottom of the sea. So I waited. I watched him gloat, watched him set his trap for you, and at the last possible second, I took the only thing he truly wanted. I took his prize. I took you. Serafina looked at him, at this man consumed by a grief so vast it had become a weapon. This isn't justice, she said, her voice shaking. This is vengeance. It is a start, he corrected. And you, Lady Serafina, are the leverage I need. Your father's testimony, which I now own thanks to that contract, will be the key to destroying them both. He will confess his part to save himself, and in doing so, he will hang Vane. She was a tool, a piece of leverage, a pawn in a decade-long war. She was the sister he'd lost, reincarnated as an instrument of revenge. And what happens to me, she asked, when your war is over? The Duke of Hawthorne looked at her, the fire in his eyes banked, replaced by that familiar, terrifying cold. I haven't decided, he said. The revelation shattered Serafina. She retreated to her wing, but not in defeat. She was furious. Furious at her father for his weakness, at Vane for his evil, and at the Duke for his cold-blooded, manipulative vengeance. But beneath the anger was a strange, disquieting understanding. She too knew what it was to be powerless while monsters destroyed your life. She spent 2 days in a haze. On the 3rd day, she did not go to the library. She went exploring. If she was a prisoner, she would know the bounds of her cell. Mrs. Pike tried to stop her, but Serafina had a new, steely authority. I am the Duchess of Hawthorne, am I not? By your master's own contract. Do not try to command me in my own home. The housekeeper, shocked by this display of dominance, reluctantly stepped aside. Serafina explored the silent, dust-covered wings of Shadowfen. She found ballrooms untouched, dining halls set for banquets that never came. And then, at the end of a long, dark corridor, she found a door that was locked. A simple, unadorned door. Unlike the others, it was clean. The brass knob was polished. She knew instinctively what was behind it. She found the Duke in the library, just as before, poring over his ledgers. I want the key, she said. He didn't look up. To what? To Clara's room. His head snapped up. The rage was back, but this time it was different. It was defensive. You will not go in there. That is not part of your domain. You have made her my business, Serafina said, walking closer. You have used her death to justify my imprisonment. I will not allow you to use her as a shield. I want to know who she was. Not as a victim, as a person. He stared at her, his jaw working. He saw she was not being manipulative. She was not challenging his grief. She was acknowledging it. Wordlessly, he reached into his waistcoat and pulled out a small silver key. He held it out. Do not, he said, his voice rough, disturb anything. She took the key and left. Clara's room was not a tomb. It was a time capsule. It was the room of a 17-year-old girl. Books of poetry, the same ones Serafina loved, were stacked on her bedside table. Watercolors of the sea, far better than Serafina's own, were pinned to a corkboard. Her riding boots were in the corner, still flecked with dried mud, and on the desk, a diary. Seraphina sat on the window seat, and, feeling like a grave robber, she opened it. She read for hours. Clara was not a saint. She was vibrant, funny, impatient, and deeply, deeply loving. She wrote about her annoying, brilliant, overprotective older brother, Maximilian. She wrote about how he was stiff and serious with the world, but how he'd sneak her chocolates and read her adventure stories. Max worries so, she had written on the last page. He thinks the world is a dark, terrible place. I keep telling him it is full of light, if he'd only open the curtains. I cannot wait to see him in Bristol. I shall buy him the most ridiculous hat I can find. Seraphina closed the book, tears streaming down her face. She was weeping not just for the lost girl, but for the broken man she had left behind. She found him on the terrace, staring out at the sea. The wind whipped his dark hair. She stood beside him, not speaking. She was terrified of the water, he said, his voice quiet. She hated ships. I told her it was the fastest way, that she'd be fine. She wasn't angry with you, Seraphina said softly. She was proud of you. She thought you were the only one who saw the world as it was. He turned, his eyes wide, his mask of control completely gone. What? I read her diary. She adored you, Maximilian. She said you worried too much, that the world was full of light. Seraphina reached out, her hand hovering, before she dared to touch his arm. His coat was rigid, but the muscle beneath was trembling. You have honored her with your vengeance, Seraphina said, her voice firm. You have hunted down the men who did this, but you have not honored her with your life. You are living in a tomb. You have locked yourself away with her memory, but you have forgotten everything she loved. You have shut out the light. He looked at her, his dark eyes searching her face. He saw no pity. He saw empathy. He saw a strength that matched his own. He saw a woman who had been through her own fire and had not been consumed. He didn't speak, but he covered her hand with his own. It was the first time they had touched, truly touched. His hand was warm. The moment was broken by a shout from the grounds below. A stable hand was running toward the house. "Your Grace! Your Grace! Men on the ridge! They've grabbed the girl!" Maximilian's head snapped up. Rose. He moved. He was not a duke. He was a force of nature. He vaulted over the terrace railing, dropping 10 feet to the ground and sprinting toward the stables, Seraphina right behind him. "Stay inside!" he roared. "I will not!" she yelled back. They saw them at the edge of the woods. 2 rough-looking men, dragging the terrified maid, Rose between them. They were Vane's men. "Alistair Vane sends his regards, Your Grace," one of them shouted. "He's tired of waiting for his property." Maximilian didn't slow, but the man pulled a pistol and aimed it, not at the Duke, but at Seraphina. "One more step, and the lady gets it." Maximilian froze. He was trapped, but Seraphina was not. She had seen Clara's riding boots. She knew what was in the stable. While the men were focused on the Duke, she had slipped into the tack room. The man leveled his pistol at the Duke. "Now, Your Grace, you're going to—" A deafening crack echoed through the air. The man with the pistol screamed and collapsed, clutching his shoulder. Maximilian stared, stunned. Seraphina stood at the door of the stable, a heavy hunting rifle braced against her shoulder, her eye still sighted down the barrel. She was pale, but her expression was pure iron. "The next one," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the lawn, "will be between the eyes." The second man, seeing his partner disabled and the lady of the house looking far more lethal than the Duke, dropped Rose and fled into the woods. Maximilian ran to Rose, helping the sobbing girl to her feet. He looked back at Seraphina, who was slowly lowering the rifle, her arms shaking from the recoil. He walked over to her, his face a mixture of awe and something she couldn't name. "You shot him," he said. "He was going to shoot you," she replied, her voice trembling now that the danger was past. "You are inconvenient, Your Grace. But you are a better option than Lord Vane." He reached out and, very gently, took the rifle from her shaking hands. His fingers brushed hers. "You saved her. You saved me." "We saved each other," she whispered. The wall of ice between them, built on vengeance and grief, had finally, irrevocably, cracked. The air in Shadowfen changed. The week following the failed kidnapping was not silent. It was charged with a tense, brittle anticipation. The house, once a tomb of stagnant grief, now felt like a fortress preparing for its final siege. Messengers on lathered horses came and went at all hours. Serafina saw them from her window, handing off sealed packets to the Duke, who seemed to live in his library, emerging only for grim-faced consultations with men in severe suits she did not recognize. She did not see him. The invisible line between their wings had been redrawn, thicker than ever. But now it felt different. Before, it had been a line of imprisonment. Now it felt like the quiet of a war room, and she was no longer certain which side of the door she was on. On the 8th day, the front gates opened not to a messenger, but to a carriage bearing the crest of the crown. It stayed for 1 hour. When it left, the house fell into a profound, unnerving silence. Serafina was in the East Wing library, Clara's diary open in her lap, when he finally came. She heard his footsteps, measured and heavy. He did not knock. He simply entered, stopping just inside the doorway. He was dressed in his impeccable black coat, the mask of the indifferent Duke set firmly in place. He looked exhausted. His eyes were shadowed, and for the first time she saw the strain of his decade-long war etched onto his face. He held a small stack of papers. "It is done," he said, his voice flat, devoid of triumph. She waited, her heart hammering a strange, uneven rhythm. "Lord Alistair Vane was arrested 2 days ago," he stated, as if reading a report. The testimony of the first mate, combined with the repair logs and the testimony of Lord Davenport, was overwhelming. The Crown has reopened the inquiry into the seized jewel. They have also found evidence of Serafina felt a cold, distant relief. The monster from her dawn betrothal was gone. "And my father?" she asked, her voice quiet. Maximilian's expression did not soften, but his gaze did. For his full confession and testimony against Vane, the Crown was lenient. He will not face trial for his part in the seized jewel, but he is, in all other senses, a ruined man. His properties, including Bellwood, have been seized to pay the debts Vane held. He and your mother were given passage to the continent. They left from Dover yesterday. She absorbed this. Ruined. Gone. An exile. She was an orphan in all but name. The life she had known, the name she had borne, was nothing but ash. "I see," she whispered. The Duke took a step forward, placing one of the documents on the table beside her. It was a legal writ, stamped with an official seal. "This is a document of nullification, filed with the magistrates this morning. The original marriage contract between our families, the one I invoked, has been voided. It is over. You are, by law, completely free, Lady Serafina." She looked at the paper. Free. The word was a mockery. She had no home to return to. She had no family to shield her. Her name was now synonymous with the most sordid scandal of the decade. She was free to starve, free to be whispered about in every drawing room, free to be the disgraced daughter of a criminal. "Thank you," she said, the words tasting like metal. He watched her, his expression unreadable. "There is one more matter." He produced another document. "I have taken the liberty of making arrangements for your future. I have acquired a property in Sussex, a small but comfortable manor far from London. It is fully staffed and has been placed in a trust in your name, along with an income that will ensure your complete independence. You will be comfortable. You will be safe." She stared at the paper he offered. A house, an income, a quiet, respectable life, a payment, a cold, sharp fury, clearer and more potent than any she had ever felt, rose in her. She stood up slowly, her hands clenched at her sides. "You are paying me," she said, her voice shaking with a sudden, violent clarity. "After all this, after using me as your pawn, after imprisoning me, after my life has been detonated by your war, you are paying me off like a dismissed servant." Maximilian's face hardened. "I am restoring what was taken from you. I am being honorable." "Honorable?" She laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "You call this honorable? You hide behind your ledgers and your contracts. You are sending me away. You are disposing of me, Your Grace. I am the last piece of your grand, terrible puzzle, and you are sweeping me off the board so you can be alone in your victory." "I am giving you your freedom!" he shot back, his control finally snapping. "I am giving you a life away from this, away from me. You are giving me another cage," she cried, advancing on him. "A smaller, politer one, but a cage nonetheless. You don't get it, do you? I have nowhere to go. My father is a disgrace. My home is gone. And you, who are responsible for all of it, are casting me out with a bag of gold and calling it honor." She left him there, storming past him, out of the room, out of the house. She ran, her skirts tangling in her legs, until she reached the cliffs. The same cliffs where Clara had dreamed of the sea. The same cliffs where Serafina had read her diary. The sun was setting, a spectacular, bloody smear of crimson and gold across the water. It was the same sunset as that first evening. She heard his footsteps on the gravel path behind her, heavier this time, angrier. He stopped several feet away. The wind whipped his dark hair across his face, and he looked less like a duke and more like the ruthless, elemental man she'd first seen. "You are ungrateful," he bit out. "And you are a coward," she retorted, spinning to face him. He was stunned into silence. No one had ever dared call him that. "A coward," she repeated, her voice raw with the wind and her tears. "You can face down armed men. You can destroy shipping empires. You can wage a war of vengeance for 10 years, but you cannot face this. You cannot face me. You cannot face the one person in the world who has seen the man behind the mask, the broken, grieving, furious man, who is just as much a prisoner of this place as I ever was." "You know nothing," he whispered, his voice dangerously low. "I know everything," she said, jabbing a finger toward the black stone house looming behind them. "Your war is over, Maximilian. You won. Vane is in the tower. My father is gone. So why is that house still a tomb? Why are the curtains in your wing still drawn? Why is Clara's room the only one that feels alive? Because you have nowhere else to go. You built your life on this mountain of grief, and now that it's gone, you're terrified you'll fall. You want to be alone because you're terrified of what happens when you're not." He turned away from her, staring at the disappearing sun. His entire body was rigid, a statue of controlled rage. "I don't know how to be anything else," he said, and the words were torn from him, a confession so painful it was barely audible. His shoulders slumped. The Duke was gone. "For 10 years," he said, his voice thick. This need for justice, it was all I was. It was my food, my drink, my air. It was the only thing that made sense. It was my purpose. And now it's done, and I am empty. There is just silence. The silence I created. He turned back to her, and his eyes were raw, stripped of all artifice. You are right. I am a coward. I am sending you to Sussex not for your honor, but for mine. Because you walked into this tomb, and you were not afraid. You saw the monster. You read my sister's diary. You held a rifle and you shone. You are the one thing in this house that is alive. You are the one thing that is not part of that old, cold darkness. He took a hesitant step toward her, his hand reaching out, then falling. I've lived in the shadows for so long, Seraphina. I thought the darkness was my armor. But you are light. You are the first light that has pierced this place in a decade. And it terrifies me. I am sending you away because I am terrified that you will leave. She looked at him, at this magnificent, broken, powerful man, laid bare by his own victory. The anger drained out of her, replaced by a sudden, aching understanding. He hadn't just lost his sister. He had lost himself. "What are you saying, Maximilian?" she asked softly. He closed the distance between them, stopping just short of touching her. "I am saying that the writ of nullification is a legal fact. The contract is void. But I am asking if you would consider a new one." His dark eyes searched hers, pleading. "A contract not of debt or collateral, not of vengeance. One that is a request. One that I am asking, not claiming. Stay. Stay here at Shadowfen. Not as my prisoner. Not as my leverage. Stay as my wife, my duchess. Stay, and teach me how to live again. Teach me," he whispered, his voice cracking, "how to open the curtains." She saw the truth of him then. He was not a monster. He was a man who had been hollowed out, and he was, for the first in his life, asking to be made whole. She raised her hand, slowly, and laid it against his cheek. His skin was rough from the wind, but warm. So warm. He closed his eyes at her touch, a shudder running through him. "The Duke claimed me before sunset," she murmured, her voice steady. "And he was a cold, ruthless man." His eyes opened, filled with fear. "But I am not talking to the Duke," she continued, her thumb brushing his cheek. "I am talking to Maximilian." He covered her hand with his, holding it to his face, as if it were a lifeline. "Seraphina, I will not be your prisoner," she said. "Never again," he vowed, his voice thick. "Good." He leaned in and kissed her. It was not a kiss of control or possession. It was a kiss of devastating, desperate hope. It was 10 years of winter breaking. It was a decade of grief and rage and cold, lonely silence, melting in a single shattering moment of warmth. It was a drowning man's first breath. And Seraphina, who had been sold at dawn and claimed at dusk, met his kiss with a fire of her own. This was not a bargain. It was not a sale. It was her choice. Her first, true choice. She wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him closer, anchoring him. "I think, Maximilian," she whispered against his lips, as the last sliver of sun vanished and left them in the soft, promising light of the rising moon. "I am claiming you now." The dawn had promised ruin, but the sunset delivered a future neither Seraphina nor Maximilian could have imagined. They found in each other not just a spouse, but a survivor. The shadows of their pasts were long, but the light they found together was brighter, forging a new legacy for Shadowfen built on truth and a hard-won love. They proved that even the most binding contracts can be broken, and that the heart has claims far stronger than any piece of paper. Thank you for joining us for this intense story of revenge and romance. If you were on the edge of your seat, please don't forget to like this video. What was the biggest twist for you? Was it the Duke's true motive or Seraphina's strength? Let us know your favorite part in the comments below. And for more historical dramas where love fights back against the odds and secrets are always revealed, make sure you subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell. We have new stories waiting for you every week.